one of the most eye-opening things I read was about Alex Murdaugh's background. He comes from a long line of deeply ethically problematic people, which I did not know. All you ever heard about him was that he came from this very storied family. They were lifelong solicitors, or like the prosecutors in their town in South Carolina, very well respected. They controlled everything. It was far more nefarious than that. Can you take us back?
Oh, it absolutely was. I mean, I think one of the biggest surprises I had researching this book was that every crime that Alex was eventually convicted of had some echo in the past. And that includes like violence against women or overtures of violence against women. That includes insurance fraud, like by the side of the road, there was an act of insurance fraud that started the family dynasty, stealing from clients, drug trafficking. There were echoes in the past for every single crime we're talking about, even a boat wreck that caused really a traumatic injury. So that surprised me too. It wasn't just Alex. It was the history going back to 1920 of this family.
Yes. I mean, it really does show you, if you have a family, a father, a grandfather who are committing crimes and teaching you either explicitly or implicitly that that's okay, your odds of becoming a criminal are obviously much higher. But hello, women of the world, pay attention. Pay attention to your spouse, the guys you're dating. It can work the other way around too. And what they come from, who they come from. So his great grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh Sr., basically committed suicide and insurance fraud at the same time.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I was in Hampton just last week. I actually was standing at the train tracks just south of Alameda, where the home place that Alex went the night of the homicides. His great-grandfather, Randolph Sr., was a very prominent man. I mean, every meal he ate was front page news. Like, where was he now? He was the district attorney for 4 counties in the Low Country of South Carolina. He was very sick. He was 53 years old. He was dying. He was at the end of his life. He had kidney failure at a time when there was no cure, right? There was no dialysis. He was broke. He had been a big investor in a bank, and then the bank failed. And through the Depression, I found documents down at the courthouse in Hampton where he just would say, there's no chance I can ever pay these people back. So he was broke, he was dying, and he knew how to do one thing incredibly well, which was sue the railroad, which at that time in 1940 was one of the only entities worth suing. So what happened was he was driving back from a poker game in Yemassee, a little town right on the Hampton County line, at 1 a.m, hottest day of the summer, 90-some degrees. He stops short of his home and turns onto a deserted train tracks and is at the base of it. And as the train is coming, and if you grew up in a small town near a railroad, you know what time the train comes through. The train is coming north, and you can hear it for miles. It's coming north. It's bearing down on this train tracks. He speeds up onto the tracks themselves, and they're blowing the whistle. They're flashing the light. It's a clear moonlit night. He sees them, and instead of like driving off, he waves at them. And what happens is there's a coroner's jury, and the coroner, of course, was a protege of Randolph Sr. The sheriff was a protege of Randolph Sr. There was an inquest the next morning, and guess what? The local coroner's jury found that in spite of the testimony of the engineer and others, it was an accident. And it cleared the way for Randolph Murdoch Jr., Alex's grandfather, to sue the railroad for the equivalent of millions of dollars, which is what he did successfully.
Is Randolph Murdoch Jr. Buster?
Randolph Murdoch Jr. is Old Buster, and Old Buster was a real force to be reckoned with. He was solicitor from 1940, when he was 25 years old, to 1986. So Roosevelt to Reagan. And he even stayed in that office beyond that time. The legislature finally essentially forced him. They created a rule that essentially forced him to retire, but he kept going into the office as a volunteer solicitor. So Randolph Murdoch Jr., Old Buster, Alex Murdaugh idolized him. He told many people that he wished he'd been born in Old Buster's day, because in those days, what you said was what the truth was. And Old Buster was, he ruled with an iron fist. He was one of those guys that would rather be feared than loved.
And he also continued fraud and potential violence against women.
So Old Buster, I was able to pull 900 pages from the National Archives of the records from his trial, his federal trial. The feds charged him with bootlegging, actually running the largest bootlegging ring in the South. He was the ringleader. They charged 24 people. Old Buster, Alex's grandfather, was charged with leading this entire ring in Colleton County, and he was accused of taking a cash bribe in the hallway of the Colleton County Courthouse, which is the hallway that we went in and out every day of Alex Murdaugh trial. He was accused of intimidating witnesses, buying off witnesses, and eventually of tampering with the jury by buying off the foreman. And he was one of the only people in that entire weeks-long federal trial that was acquitted. So there's a history of Alex Murdaugh was convicted of drug trafficking. His grandfather was credibly accused and narrowly escaped being convicted of bootlegging. Wow. So again, there's echoes in the past.
Tell us about the mistress who got on the wrong side of Alex Murdaugh's grandfather.
So there was testimony in Alex trial, as you remember. There was testimony that Alec was somewhat of a philanderer, and that certainly is a history in the family going back generations. His grandfather, Old Buster, had a mistress, several, but one in particular who he was in touch with for many, many years, and her name was Ruth Fox. And Ruth Fox was married to a local, like a northern baron who came down and bought a plantation, and she was from one of the nation's first families, a really impressive woman in her own right. And she had been in the Navy during World War II, like training pilots, which is kind of wild to think about what kind of woman was doing that in the 40s. And she met Buster and asked for his help in getting out of her obligations. He's like, I know everybody. I'll know all U.S. senators. I'll help you get out of this bind. They got to know each other. And what you know, a year later, she is pregnant with his child. It's just such an incredible story. She goes to the house, and we're talking about the same house that Alec went to the night of the homicides at Moselle. She goes to the house, knocks on the door, speaks to Alec's grandmother and says, you have a son, I have a son, these boys shouldn't eat. And the grandmother says, don't let my name come out of your mouth ever again, go away. And it was a stunning thing because she had survived essentially when she had told Old Buster that she was pregnant. He had tried to have her killed. He had a fixer, the story goes, he had a fixer of one of many who laid in wait underneath her porch one night and got a little bit too drunk and fell asleep and didn't kill her. So there was just like this incredible echoes throughout this story. Isn't it amazing?
Yes, it is amazing. I mean, you must have been just slack-jawed when you read up about the direct line from which he came. And it makes sense of everything. So it didn't stop there. It didn't even skip a generation. Alex's father also had a history of paying people off to cover up a boat accident, which of course would set off Alex's own story with a different boat accident as well.
Well, there was and there was certainly a terrible boat accident in 1998 from the same island, like Murdoch Island, where you'll remember the tragic boat wreck that killed Mallory Beach in 2019. They took the Murdoch family boat from the family compound, which is called Murdoch Island. Back in 1998, Alec's younger brother was having a party on Murdoch Island. There was a boat there, and it's incredible. I couldn't believe it when I saw the documents. It had been seized in a drug raid by the solicitor's office, so by Old Buster, and he liked the boat. So he kept it for his own use at the island, and the family used it. So it's late at night. There's some guests there that wanted to take the boat home rather than the roads because they didn't want to get in trouble. They've been drinking for many hours, and these young men set off on a boat ride home. And it's tricky. We know from what happened with the wreck that killed Mallory Beach. It's very shallow waters in places. They hit a shoal and stopped, and then immediately started back up and didn't realize that one of the guests had fallen overboard and had gotten run over by the motor and sustained a traumatic brain injury. And, I've got hundreds of pages of documents from the state that show the Murdochs were involved in trying to make that wreck go away. Even some of the same DNR, the natural resources officers, Even some of the same officers who were involved in the Mallory Beach wreck they were working that night as well.
For those of us holding our breath for the past several months as we came up to this election, we can finally exhale. Work can at last be done on the major issues this country's facing, one of the most significant being our national debt. The fact is, we're broke, and that debt is a house of cards for our nation that cannot be quickly dismantled. So the strategy remains the same. You might want to diversify your savings. This is why I want to tell you about Birch Gold. So many things are out of our control, out of our president's control. So it can be important to have a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold Group can help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news is it does not cost you 1 cent out of pocket. Text MK to 989898 to get your free info kit. Plus, right now, you will receive a free 1-ounce silver eagle coin for every $5,000 purchased. Protect your savings with Birch Gold. Text MK to 989898 and claim your eligibility for free silver today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.